Hello and welcome to this video on other strategies a country may use for growth and development. So in this video we're going to look at a range of strategies to promote growth and development that are not really market orientated or interventionist. The first policy we're going to look at, or the first strategy we're going to look at, is the process of industrialization. And so industrialization is moving into more of the manufactured goods. So traditionally, it's assumed that development requires a process of industrialization. So to move away from primary sector goods more into secondary sector goods. An economic development model called the Lewis model is based on this theory that structural change is required within an economy to move it away from low value, low productivity agricultural industries to higher value, higher productivity manufacturing industries. So let's now look at this model, the Lewis structural change model of growth. This is a dualist model, which is a fancy way for saying we assume two sectors within our economy. We assume that traditionally we have an agricultural sector. And what we want to do is we want to create or set up a manufacturing sector and for this to grow so that our economy can develop. So the theory goes that government should support any move that transports surplus labour away from the agricultural sector. So if you have a look at this section here, surplus labour needs to be transferred away from the low productivity agricultural sector. And these surplus workers in agriculture are likely to offer zero marginal product because they are excess to requirements. So effectively you have a lot of people working in agriculture that don't really contribute much. They offer sort of diminishing returns or constant returns at best. So actually transferring them away is going to have very little opportunity cost. So we should encourage people to move from the countryside to cities to take up jobs in factories. Now the manufacturing sector, possibly aided by finance from a multinational company, if we can attract that, can then start to grow. And the profits that are made from this sector are then reinvested back into the sector to make it even larger. In doing so, we also supply the manufacturing sector with more people. And so begins a transition to a higher productivity, higher value economy with a significant manufacturing base. Additional profits need to be saved and reinvested to sustain this process, and eventually we move from an agricultural based economy to being much more reliant on manufacturing. So some examples of countries perhaps where we might say this has been the case would be perhaps China and India. If we look down here at the bottom right hand corner, we could see the proportion of workers involved in agriculture in China has declined over time, whilst manufacturing workers have increased. When we see in India, we see a decline again in agricultural workers, an increase in manufacturing, but particularly an increase in services in the tertiary sector here. So India has gone a bit further and had its approach rather than using manufacturing, has moved more towards service-based industries. However, there are some criticisms of this model that suggest we have to go through this process of industrialization. So profits made in the industrial sector may not be invested locally, reinvested, they may be repatriated by the multinational, transnational companies. The reinvested profits may be spent on capital-intensive technologies, which reduces the outlet for surplus labour, meaning that incomes do not rise. We don't deal with these issues of employment, and development is not achieved. Again, the assumption that there is surplus labour in the agricultural sector and that there are opportunities in the industrial sector is not always valid. When we look at many cities, people who've migrated to cities, we see that they're not employed in manufacturing. For example, unemployed people living in squats. The second strategy to consider for economic growth and development here is tourism. So travel and tourism are one of the world's largest industries with a global economic contribution of almost $7 trillion. For many developing countries in particular, tourism is a major part of their economy and significant source of income and employment. The income elasticity of demand for overseas travel is high, where we consider actually for primary products tends to be quite low. So this is quite a nice way to diversify. As people around the world get richer, the demand for tourism and travel increases. In over 150 countries, tourism is one of the top 5 export earners. And increasingly we see a growth in tourism from developing countries to other developing countries, known as South-South tourism. In the tourist industry, women make up 70%, and a lot of tourist workers are under 25. So this is quite good with addressing inequality and in particular gender inequality. So this chart here shows us developing countries and the share of their total GDP that comes from tourism. So what are the benefits of tourism? Well, it creates jobs. Tourism is a labour-intensive industry, employs a higher percentage of women, can earn foreign currency, an important source of diversification for many smaller countries, a boost to aggregate demand, and often tourism comes hand in hand with investment in local infrastructure, things like airports, telecommunications, perhaps even roads and stuff like that, which can have beneficial effects, multiplier effects for the economy. Some criticisms of tourism. While sometimes the workers in the tourist industries can be exploited, for example, the rapid growth of the sex industry in many countries and the unethical treatment of workers. Many are migrant workers suffering from poor employment conditions. We might have a tourist resort, but it's owned by a foreign national, and so actually much of the profit leaves the country. Sometimes we have luxury tourist resorts with all-inclusive deals, and actually the local economy doesn't benefit from any of the boost that tourism brings. We might consider externalities. We might consider the impact that things like Airbnb are having on property prices, making housing less affordable for people. And this idea that we're kind of diminishing certain cultures by exposing it to lots of tourism. The third strategy we may consider is the development of primary product industries, but then using that money to reinvest into diversifying the economy. So for many developing countries, their comparative advantage will be in primary products. And often we have a large supply of labour and there's not much of an investment cost in order to take advantage of these primary products. It can be an important source of export revenue and foreign currency. It can also attract FDI. And what many countries try and do is use this as a stepping stone towards economic development. So this infographic here is talking about Dubai, and they've made a lot of money out of oil and gas, and they're using those profits to try and diversify their economy. So we can see that they now have 30 plus medical and surgical specialities that they offer in their country for healthcare tourism. They have many banks located and financial services companies. They have 200 media companies. They produce aluminium to try and add value. They have many airlines and try and become a hub for connecting flights. They do a lot of trading through their ports. They're trying to set up lots of hotels and tourism and so on. So they've a good example here of trying to use their primary products to then create further economic development. And we might see if the success of Dubai here in diversifying their economy might be replicated by some African economies. When we look at their natural resources, why would the country not take advantage of these natural resources? But then the key would be to use the profits wisely to try and develop their economy. Again, if we look at the amount of oil that certain countries have in reserve in total, we might again think that some of these countries here might use that primary product wealth to then invest and diversify in their economy. Criticisms of this approach, well, again, we've spoken about some of the issues with primary product dependency. Volatile commodities markets, sometimes the argument that there's a resource curse, which can lead to tensions such as corruption and war, monopoly power, easy wealth, which discourages proper economic development in other areas. Investing purely in primary products may discourage investment in other aspects of the economy. Ultimately, primary products, we're often talking about finite resources here, and so should we be specializing in something that one day we know we're out. So in this video, we've looked at a range of different strategies a country may consider in order to promote growth and development. That's it. Thanks very much for listening.